So much. Good morning. It's 8 minutes past 10. Welcome to our programme. More and more adults are being diagnosed with ADHD, according to an investigation for this programme. A condition usually associated with children, as you know. The disorder can cause severe inattentiveness and impulsiveness. People who've probably lived with the condition all their lives are only now being helped. Left untreated, it's linked to mental health problems like depression and anxiety. More than 1.6 million prescriptions are now being dispensed by the NHS for ADHD medication each year, double the figure of a decade ago, according to new research for this programme. We brought you Jim Reed's exclusive report earlier. Here's a short extract before we have a conversation about this.
7-year-old Erin has recently been diagnosed with ADHD. He can't concentrate in class, finds it very hard to focus.
We need some more bacon.
It's now understood the disorder does run in families. Last year, his mum Sam was diagnosed with the same condition.
It was like I knew there was something more to it than just me being a bit rubbish, frankly, as a human, which is what I'd always put it down to. Just not having any willpower and not being able to cope. I've never had a job for longer than 18 months. I don't get fired, I just leave. I get to the point where I can't cope anymore. Either I'm too bored or I'm too frustrated, or I genuinely believe that I'm doing such a terrible job that I need to put my employer out of their misery.
ADHD has only been recognised in adults for 10 years. The vast majority of those diagnosed over 18 will have been living with it since childhood. Overall, prescriptions for the disorder have doubled in a decade, with adult patients now thought to be growing at the fastest rate.
This is what it looks like, the little blue pill of joy.
The main treatment is still, though, contentious.
That's it.
Like most, Sam was given stimulant medication.
I was a little bit concerned. I just was a bit scared, I think, because I think it occurred to me quite quickly that this is something that I was going to have to be on for the rest of my life. You feel it almost on the hour. It's like, boom, kick in, and it's like, whew, okay, okay, brilliant, no anxiety, that's really good, and then you just get on with your day. I can concentrate for a lot longer, and I come out and I don't feel broken.
The exact causes of ADHD are still not fully understood. A mix of genes and environmental factors appears to lead to a shortage of specific chemical messengers in the brain. Most drugs are designed to boost the level of those chemicals.
It's absolutely positive that we are dramatically increasing the prescriptions for stimulant medication because, as we know, it's a massively underdiagnosed, undertreated issue. The actual effect of giving somebody with ADHD medication is that they just feel normal.
But prescribing stimulants in ever-growing numbers is controversial and opposed by some psychiatrists.
I'm really worried about it because no long-term benefits have ever been demonstrated for stimulants in terms of improving people's quality of life or their performance in school tests or work performance or anything like that.
Looking at the data, there's no sign of the trend slowing down. More pills are being prescribed year on year in the UK. For some then, that is a risk, a concern. For others, it just means more people are finally getting the help they really need.
Let's talk now to Alex Lovelace, who was only diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago. It was his sister Sam you saw in the film. Abby Nichol is here, helps run the ADHD ASD Community Support Group UK on Facebook and has a son with the condition. Michelle Beckett was diagnosed with the condition at 44 and now runs the charity ADHD Action. And Labour MP Joe Platt is here, chair of the ADHD All-Party Parliamentary Group. And we're going to talk to two viewers in a moment who've got in touch with us as well. Alex, first of all, what's it like being an adult and being diagnosed with ADHD?
I think like a massive relief, actually. Yeah, I mean, I've struggled for so many years. I mean, I've done well for myself. I've got a family. You know, I consider myself successful, but I spent life going through sort of boom-bust cycles of sort of periods of sort of intense focus, and then followed by, you know, sort of deep depressions. I just didn't understand why it was happening, and it was exhausting, and it just became too much for me to cope with. Eventually, I had one episode, and I was just, I can't cope with this anymore. I can't keep doing this. Something is not right. So I managed to get myself into sort of the diagnostic system within the NHS, and and someone mentioned ADHD, and I went off and did a bit of research, and suddenly everything fell into place. It was just like, read a sort of fact sheet about it and go, oh my God, that's me. I can't believe that that's me. And it was such an intense thing to have to go through, to suddenly realise that, you know, the difficulties I was suffering for my whole life since I was a kid were not something I was doing wrong, or weakness, or just being dozy or dippy or whatever name you want to come up with for me. I was actually, there was something different about my brain, and you know, for someone to just that realisation alone, I think made such a massive difference to my life. And since then, things have been so much better than they were before, and I'm so much more able to cope with the situations that arise. And of course, there's a medication which helps a lot, but it's, you know, the medication takes some of the pressure off. But I think ultimately, you know, it's about that realisation and lifestyle change that goes with it that helps you to cope, and that's where I am today, doing really well.
Sounds amazing. The way you've described that kind of relief, and you're clearly very passionate about a description of why you were behaving like you were behaving. I want to bring in you, Michelle, if I may. I want to talk about the medication because it can be controversial. It is controversial in some people's views. We don't know what the long-term effects are. What's your view on it as a representative of ADHD Action?
Well, like Alex, I was diagnosed as an adult, so quite recently, only a year ago. And actually, the diagnosis itself was transformative, but the medication is too. And I didn't realise quite how transformative it can be. Just that feeling of calm and peace and serenity. When you have adult ADHD, more often than not, you have thousands of thoughts a minute, and it's really hard to control those. The way we take in information is not linear, so that's really difficult to process, so there's a lot of overwhelm.
Are you, sorry to interrupt, but are you saying then that peace, that calm, means that any potential risks long term actually outweigh those risks?
Absolutely.
Right.
And ADHD nearly killed me. And I firmly believe if I wasn't on medication, it may well have done so. And that is true for many people. So the risks potentially, and it has been used for over 40 years incredibly safely for many, many people, the risks are so low, the risks are higher without.
Okay.
You're more likely to be killed in a car accident, for example, 8 times more likely. You're 11 times 11 years reduced life expectancy for adult ADHD.
OK. Let me ask Jo Platt about this, chair of the ADHD All-Party Parliamentary Group, Labour MP. As a politician, where are you on the medication?
So I think obviously, as Michelle just spelled out there, that there's a mix, isn't there? It's about awareness for me. It's about making mental health professionals, teachers, businesses aware of ADHD condition and putting them support mechanisms in there. For instance, it doesn't have to be medication, but if you're spotting ADHD early enough, say in education, it's wrapping that support service around that person.
OK, you will know that, and I've got some more messages here and I'll read them in a moment. People wait, children and adults can wait months, years, decades for a diagnosis. That is unacceptable. Absolutely.
And what we found out through parliamentary questions is that there is no holding record for waiting times. NICE have developed some guidelines, but again, the assessment guidelines are not within that.
OK. Abby, hello, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Do you know, I'm getting messages from adults saying I have recently... Let me read you this, for example, from Steve and then Simon. Steve, I was diagnosed and treated for ADHD as a child. Once I reached the age of 18, though, my treatment was weaned off and I was left to fend for myself. I'm now 29 and have struggled with the effects of ADHD since. I've spoken to my doc, I've been referred to a specialist, but with a 10 to 12-month waiting list, it's not good. Simon texts this. Just been diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's, age 55. I'm really relieved I'm disabled and not mad. How do you react to that, Abby?
That's quite a normal response, actually. It's all too familiar for me.
Yeah.
I do run the support, well, a lady called Sarah Van Santen, she runs the support group that I just merely admin. And the amount of people and stories that we hear, this is just one of hundreds.
OK. I'm going to bring in, Abby, if I may, Glenna, who's contacted us. Glenna was watching this morning. She's in Kent. She works for the NHS. She's 62, and her children, 3 children have been diagnosed with ADHD. Hi, Glenna, how are you?
Hello. Hello.
Hi, thanks for coming on the programme. Also with us, Tom. It's not his real name. He's 27. He's in Newcastle, self-employed. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hello. I'm not bad. Yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Glenna, you believe, well, now your children have been diagnosed, that you too have ADHD.
Yes, I do. When the children were diagnosed, we were told that it was a genetic condition, and because we had 3 children with it, it seemed obvious that my husband and I would both have it too. So I've struggled for many years. I've had medication, which I managed to get my doctor to give me, but that stopped and I still struggle.
OK. Alex, your brother and sister also have a diagnosis of ADHD in adulthood as well?
Yep, absolutely.
So the genetic link is
Yeah,
clear.
absolutely. And our father was clearly where that comes from. He had projects around the house that were half finished everywhere. He couldn't sit still. He'd sit in front of his favourite TV programme for half an hour and he'd get 10 minutes into it and just get up and walk off.
Right.
And this was the behaviour that we grew up with, that house that was bits finished and projects that were never quite done, and him moving from sort of industry to industry, doing different types of jobs. And
yeah, Glenna, do you want an official diagnosis?
Yes, I would like an official diagnosis. And while listening to the other chap there talking, I can so relate to that. Oh, my goodness.
Really? So,
I cannot believe it.
let me ask Michelle for her advice from ADHD Action. Should Glenna go back to the GP?
She should, but sadly what happens is that many GPs aren't aware of ADHD or how it presents. We have cases where adults have gone to the GP, they've thought, this is me, as we have all thought, this fits the bill. Go along and say, you can't have ADHD, you've got a degree, or you have a job, or you're successful, or only children get ADHD. So we have an awful lot of work to do, even with GPs, to raise awareness about adult ADHD. There's an awful lot of work to do.
Let me bring in Tom. Hi, Tom. You have a diagnosis, and you've had ADHD all your life, obviously. But you have a concern about stimulants being the first-line medication. Is that correct?
Yes. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 7, 27 now. As a child, parents had different opinions. My mum thought I should be medicated. My dad thought I shouldn't. In the end, with a to and fro, I decided as a child not to take any medication. As I then got into sort of, the world of work, if you like, I started realising I'm really struggling to try and keep a job down any more than 4 or 5 months at a time. So that sort of prompted me to get re-referred back into my local adult ADHD service. And that had an 18-month waiting list at the time, which I did whittle down. It goes quicker than you'd think. And again, reassessed, yes, I've still got ADHD. More inattentive than I used to be, but far less hyperactive. So I haven't grown out of it, but it's changed slightly, the parameters.
Okay.
And again, I was offered stimulant medication, Ritalin, which methylphenidate, which I tried. The side effects were horrific. Cold hands, cold feet, profuse sweating, pounding chest, zero appetite, next to zero sleep. I've tried a few different stimulant medications, and I now take dexamphetamine, which seems to be the best one for me so far.
Okay.
However,
I just want to bring Abby back in, if I may, because your son, who has ADHD, he was diagnosed when he was 6. He recently came off his medication, didn't he, Abby?
It's all still trial.
Oh, is it?
He's on his 3rd week without medication. He's been on it since the age of 6, and he is coming up for age 12 now. This is the first time that he's been off his medication. Yeah, interesting.
Well, what's the briefly, because we've got to draw the conversation to a close, sadly, but what's the difference?
There's pros and cons.
Okay. The jury's out then.
Yeah, he does need support.
Yeah.
He needs a lot of support. All these children need support, and with medication or without. Their stigma needs to go.
Okay.
It's awful.
Thank you, all of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. A couple more messages here. Michelle on Facebook. After my son was diagnosed at 8, I realised I had it too, but was dismissed many times by my GP, and I was offered antidepressants, but I knew it wasn't depression. Finally diagnosed at the age of 44. Medication is offered, but accessing ADHD therapy is nigh on impossible. And Nat on Facebook says, not all health areas prescribe for ADHD. As an adult with it, I live in Lincolnshire and there is no specialist. Many more will be in this position as you need a supervising consultant. I'm left to struggle on. And coffee is my only medication. It's crazy to have to move house to get the right treatment. Thank you all very much. Thanks for coming on the programme.